Kia ora, everybody. Oh, that's okay, nice. Got our bearings. Just a little bit of background on me, but firstly I just want to say thank you. I was really lucky at a young age, at 18, to find my tribe, and that was in the museum space. So I'm really lucky to have been working in it for 7 years now, and consider a lot of museum curators, digital staff, directors, everyone now my friends. So I feel very lucky to have experienced it at such a young age. But I am now, at 25, considered a serial entrepreneur. Not a title that I gave myself, but over the last 7 years have developed digital platforms that have been in all continents and lots of countries around the world, but all started in Wellington, New Zealand, which I'll take you through today. My personal journey. So my parents came here in 1997 from Turkey. We arrived in New Zealand, in Nelson, New Zealand, and there was a very big storm that day, and we arrived in one of those tiny little ATRs. I think that's what they were, but it was death-defyingly terrifying. And ended up spending majority of my life in Nelson. I went to Nelson College for Girls and decided that after my exams I would come straight up to Wellington, and that's what I did. I took a gap year in 2010, so I've got a very big mission which I've gone on to after coming to Wellington from high school, that I would get more women into tech, because when I did my computer science degree after I took my gap year, there wasn't a lot of women in those classes, so that's a personal mission of mine. But it led me in my gap year to go back to Turkey for a year and going to Gallipoli and going to both sides, so going to the New Zealand side first and then going to the Turkish side and crying for both sides, which speaks very highly of how New Zealand has become my home, but also being in the motherland, having the affinity for both countries. But within that gap year, a very, very big issue, and that was going to all of these massively preserved historic sites and paying €70 for an audio guide that 1,000 other people had worn that day, and in broken English. And because I know Turkish, I would hear the translator and the storyteller, the narrator in the back, reading what was on the plaque, and then talking to somebody in the background in Turkish and making jokes. So the experience was very skewed, and I was very angry that I'd paid that much money to go and experience this digital audio guide which provided me nothing. So with that frustration, I came back to New Zealand, started my computer science degree, and halfway through my first semester, started STQRY. The beginnings of STQRY, it was actually due to we went to Wellington Zoo, a few friends and I, and looked at this pelican, and on the plaque it read that a pelican can hold 13 gallons of water in its beak, but when you look at the beak it's very thin. So it was hard to imagine being in a zoo environment and looking at something that's very static, that's a plaque, and then looking at the animal and not having the content to visualize it properly. It was also the time that Te Papa put out an RFP for a digital app. And one of the scenarios that we came up with was building this digital platform where Te Papa would use a content management system, put in all of their digital content, and we would provide a platform to show that to hundreds and thousands of users that would download this one app in every new city that they went to. It was a project for us. We didn't understand the sheer scale that this would grow into, but basically overnight we had raised investment from Gareth Morgan here in Wellington, and we started working with Wellington Zoo, who came on as a test case study with a 4-year contract, and also the Portrait Gallery. We then went up to Auckland, and Auckland Museum came on board. We then went to Seattle, and Seattle have this amazing program, which is the 1% to Art program, where all of the tax from the state goes into public art. So there was a massive chunk of capital and interest within Seattle and Washington State to fund the arts. So we built the Story app based on that, and within 4 years, not only being in New Zealand and Seattle, where both of our bases were, we were in Singapore, Malaysia, Israel, all throughout the United States. And basically the app that we created, the storytelling platform, where we had 1,000 customers in 4 years. And that's from museums to art galleries, everyone within the glam sector. We also became a digital development platform, which turned into Story 2.0. So we developed a series of products from Wayfinding to a product called Story Corporate, where we worked with organisations like Kiwi Bank and Westpac to share the stories of their organisation back to the thousands of people that were on the ground. And also a product called Ticketing. But I just want to take a step back with the indoor mapping and wayfinding. It was brand new back then. So this little piece of technology called BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy Beacons, had just come out, and there was only a handful of providers globally. We ended up working with a company out of Seattle, actually, that were developing these tiny little beacons. And it was more of a, for us, we saw it as it would have a very big impact in the museum space, because as a user's walking around, we didn't want them to scan a QR code, which is what we'd based the storytelling platform on originally. So a user would scan a QR code and get the story behind the artwork or scroll through. We wanted to have a seamless experience for users when they walked into a museum, that they would just walk around as they would and get the stories alerted to them and notified to them instantly. And in turn, we could map out that journey and then send it to them in an email, and then they could share that with friends and family. But then that would allow us to hold a lot of data and look at dwell times and how people congregated around specific artworks, or if they congregated around stairs or elevators or public toilets, and what that looked like, so the management of people. Then we understood that it was a bigger universal problem, so airports, hospitals, schools, large venues, and that led us to working with LAX, Sea-Tac, the Getty, Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. Also talking with the Natural History Museum, because the year prior they spent $5 million on an indoor mapping and wayfinding product, which they had to get rid of 6 months later. So a very expensive exercise to solve a bigger issue, which was navigating a venue. We developed that for about 2 years with support from Microsoft and Amazon, which, even though competitors, support the startup community, which is quite good. And after doing that, so we had all corners of the museum experience down. The user would download the Story app, come to the museum, go around, look at different artifacts, sculptures, statues, everything else. And then they could get the story using the notifications with the BLE beacons, and then indoor mapping and wayfinding when they were in the venue. But a big point that we were missing was the ticketing component. And before a user arrives at the event, they will buy a ticket. So before they see their favourite show or hear someone talking or whatever, you would have bought a ticket, and you would have bought a ticket to this event as well. Whenever I talk, I always ask who has had a positive ticketing experience in the last 6 months, and not one hand goes up. I'd be very interested to see who has had a good ticketing experience in the last 6 months here. It's not an industry that we think about, maybe to this one. It's not an industry that we think about, but if you do think about it, a lot of people management, the first points of experience, information regarding the event, all stems from the ticket buying process, and then how that journey carries on after you buy the ticket. I'll get back to that in a second, but I just want to talk about Baltimore Art Museum. Becoming a digital platform for the museum sector, we were commissioned by the Baltimore Art Museum to create this crowdsourcing audio tool. This was about 4 years ago, so the age of audio was just beginning. It wasn't growing at this pace that it's growing now, where audio is actually the largest growing medium that people communicate with. But for their 100th year, we developed an addition to the storytelling app where users could go around the museum, look at sites of interest, but then actually start recording stories of what interests them the most. And we prompted them with with a question. So your favourite Baltimore Art Museum artwork. And the user would hold down the green button and record the story. It would then go to another slide where they would take a selfie, and then it would become a part of this beautiful image board grid of everyone's stories, and people could go in and listen to everything. We recorded about 5,500 stories across a 3-month period. So it was very, very successful. And it was a very simple means of interacting with the customer or interacting with the visitor that was coming through. They used that to get more sponsorship. They used it to create a timeline of how long people had been coming to the museum and their stories around what they loved about the museum so much and what they wanted for the future. So it was very, very highly successful, and it was a very small, simple feature just a feature that we developed to share stories, and it worked very, very well. So this is a product that I'm helping with other companies now, although we don't do it in story at the moment. It is something that's still very needed, and like I said before, growing at exponential rates with the audio storytelling. Going back to the ticketing aspect of our product, we work with the Broad Art Museum in LA, and if you haven't been, it's amazing. Eli Broad has a personal art collection. He's a big property tycoon and mogul in LA, and he has a personal contemporary art collection, and he built this beautiful museum in downtown LA. And we were commissioned to do the ticketing for the museum. For us, we wanted to make ticketing simple, so time tickets, and when users would go to the website, buy them beforehand or come on site. They didn't have a kiosk, they didn't have a reception, so we mobilised all of their volunteers. We gave them little receipt printers that they would attach to their belts. We gave them mobile phones that would scan credit cards and process payments and upsell merchandise and programs and food and beverage and everything else. We mobilised their 500 staff that was in the museum, which meant that they didn't have to have someone sitting at the desk at reception, where it actually made them more interacting and going to the visitor. So it was very successful. We processed about 1 million tickets in the first 3 months. So from a scaling perspective, we were operating at the same scale as Twitter, and having a lot of traffic go through it in LA. And that's basically the premise for my next company, PassFear. So we ended up selling Story in 2015, which is 3 years ago. I took a little bit of a break and started a company called PassFear. So PassFear's been in development for 2 years. It is another ticketing product because ticketing still hasn't been solved globally. And we joke about this, but we want our slogan to be, it just works, because a lot of ticketing, actually majority of our ticketing companies that are out there at the moment just simply don't work. So we're using the learnings that we've had from the Broad, the high scale, high volume of people trying to buy something all at once, the sheer volume of people that come through any sort of venue doors all at once. We can be looking at having 10,000 people all lining up to get into a venue in a 15-minute period. And every hour that it's the size of 10,000, a crowd of 10,000 people are standing in a queue, it costs the venue $190,000. So we're looking to reduce that drastically, and we've got that down to about a 3-minute everyone's in the door exercise. Very stressful. What's in the future for us? I'll just kind of skim over this, but we've got really big expansion plans, and all from Wellington. So we're doing a lot of the R&D in Wellington. Our development team are here, and we'll be expanding that globally. We are on the AWS framework, so it allows us to scale globally very quickly. And we've got great support from them in Wellington. We also have support from Callaghan Innovation, which basically allows us to do cool things like facial recognition. So as a user, you don't even need a ticket, you just walk in through the door because we've got a digital copy of your face, which you agree to because you know what we're doing with it, so it's not creepy. But basically starting the experience on the right foot, which is all about the user, which currently is not. I just want to talk about quickly, with my generation, so I'm 25 now, with my generation, we don't have enough money to buy houses, so we spend our disposable income on experience and travel. What does that mean? That means more traffic for museums, that means more traffic for concerts and events. It means more traffic for talks and travel and hotels and Ubers and everything else, everything that is the experience. It's driving more traffic to the experience currency. And that's what we want to become, is the portal for users to start their experience journey. So we look at more of the currency of experience rather than the currency of saving and trying to buy that house, which takes forever. We operate a scale fast, fail fast mentality, and over the last couple of months, I've been the entrepreneur in residence at Mahuki, which is the innovation accelerator here in Te Papa. We've been working with 10 teams. Each team has a co-founder, and each team has either a digital or a service solution to some of the problems that the glam sector are experiencing. It's been not only learnings for myself, but I hope I've taught them a lot as well. But it is the scale fast, fail fast mentality. We don't have the luxury of being in an industry for long periods of time because we need to understand if it's a global opportunity to validate the idea. So we go out, we talk to hundreds of customers a day. I still remember when we first started STQRY, we got the museum's Aotearoa listings for every museum, and we were calling 50 museums a day to try and get a meeting. And that was me at 18, so it was very terrifying, but that's the mentality, is scale fast. And if it doesn't work, fail fast and then move on to the next thing. Our appetite for risk is also very high, which is interesting because over the last 7 years, we've been working in an industry, which is the glam sector, that moves relatively slowly. But if we can take out the risk of digital solutions, bring them into a museum space that's been tested, tried and true, it takes out a lot of that risk for larger organisations. So my number one advice to any digital company that's coming in, or digital product that's coming into the glam sector, is for them to take out all of the risk beforehand, so that when they do go into a proposition that's being touched and used by thousands of hands, millions of hands every year, that it's going to withstand the sheer volume of interaction that is put against it. So it has to be robust. And if it's not robust, then don't even touch it. Don't even go into the sector, because until you're ready and at that point, because it has to withstand that traffic. And it's all about the new currency and what really matters. The reason why I love the museum sector so much is that although there's money coming through the doors, we don't look at the success of what a museum is on the money and the bottom line. It's how many visitors we're engaging with every year and our greater outreach into the community, which makes it so much different to every other industry, which is all about that bottom line. So what it is for us is creating the new currency of digital platforms that matter and make a difference. Whether that be educating the hundreds of school kids that come in through these doors every day, as well as lifelong learning and getting our millennials through into digital spaces as well. So that's the new currency. The new currency is experience and memories, and that's what we're funding. Thank you so much. I don't know if I've still got 11 minutes, so that's more room for questions if anybody has any. And thank you so much.
Is this thing on? Oh, hi. Thank you. That was wonderful. I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
You talked a lot about the appetite for risk, and great call about just, the companies make sure that they can just reduce all the risk.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you have any advice for the glam sector itself, and saying how that we can actually increase our appetite for risk, because I totally vibe with what you're saying, where we move slowly, we have a really low appetite for risk, and
Yeah.
I would love to see that increased from from inside the sector. So I just want your thoughts on that.
Definitely. I guess it works both ways. I did talk about how we reduce that risk just to make the decision easier for museums. At the end of the day, there's millions of people coming in through, or hundreds of thousands of people coming in through your doors, and so it has to withstand sheer volume. And the ability to grow with the company itself. We were very fortunate from a museum perspective that the customers that we were and the organisations that we were working with worked with us to develop further. So with the Baltimore Art Museum, we met Nancy Proctor at a conference, Museums in the Web conference in the United States, and I think I was 18 at this point. Not allowed to be in the hotel bars after the conference, but snuck my way through, just being a Kiwi, why not? And we developed a relationship that was purely digital. So coming from a development perspective, what we were building was great, but it was essentially a product, so we were going in as a vendor. But having the ability that we had as a team from a development perspective, and how we could translate that back into the museum itself. So we spent about a year working with Nancy, and it wasn't until the crowdsource app that we built with the 100th year anniversary that she really gave us that chance. So after a year of talking, she gave us that chance. But then that stemmed into the relationship that we had with the Broad, which was her husband, Rich Cherry. And after that, after we did the product for Nancy and her museum, we worked with the Broad's team to develop the ticketing solution. That was them taking the risk to give us a lot of responsibility, but in turn, it was making use of a team that we'd already had in an industry that we'd already been in, and us proving to them that we could develop digital solutions that would work. So my advice for more organisations is, for more cultural and glam sector organisations, is develop the relationship. And this is a little bit controversial, but going back to the same digital agencies time after time and getting charged 10, 15, 20x what a startup with a very, very capable team can do, I'm getting a little bit tired of it. But it's finding the capable one. So obviously doing due diligence just like you would with a digital agency, but also having the relationship, because sometimes the relationships that organisations make in the glam sector with smaller startups means their room for success is a lot higher, and you get to ride on that success as well. In the startup world, we have a lot of support coming in from some of the biggest companies in the world. And it's becoming partners in that rather than just being seen as a vendor-customer relationship. But it's how you can globally start with that PR, globally expand and help each other. So that would be I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah, that would be my sort of 2 cents. Yeah. Any other questions? Is that it?
I think that might be it.
Cool.
Thanks
awesome.
very much, Ezel. Just a quick correction, Nancy and Rich are not married.